Grigory Rasputin. He was a Russian mystic, faith healer, and self-proclaimed holy man who rose from humble beginnings to become one of the most influential and controversial figures in Russian history. Born in 1869 in a small Siberian village, he had no formal religious training, but gained a reputation as a wandering man with alleged healing powers. His life changed forever when he was introduced to the Romanov royal family, where he became a trusted advisor to Tsarina Alexandra. She believed that Rasputin possessed divine abilities, particularly after he seemingly helped ease the symptoms of her son, Alexei, who suffered from hemophilia. This led to an unprecedented level of influence over the royal family, fueling resentment and paranoia among Russian aristocrats and politicians. Despite being viewed as a spiritual figure, Rasputin was also surrounded by scandal and allegations of immorality. He preached an unusual doctrine where one could achieve divine grace through sin and repentance, leading to rumors of wild orgies, womanizing, and drunken excesses. Many nobles and clergy saw him as a fraud who manipulated the Romanovs for power, while others feared his mystical influence over the monarchy. His growing power over state affairs, combined with Russia's increasing instability, made him a symbol of corruption in the eyes of the Russian public. As World War I raged on and Russia's internal crisis deepened, Rasputin became a scapegoat for the empire's failures. His assassination in 1916 only added to his legend. A group of aristocrats, determined to rid Russia of his influence, lured him to a palace, poisoned him, shot him multiple times, beat him, and finally threw him into the icy Neva River. Yet, according to reports, Rasputin did not die immediately from the poison or gunshots, and an autopsy later suggested that drowning was his actual cause of death. This bizarre series of events only amplified the belief that he possessed supernatural abilities, further cementing his status as a near mythical figure. Rudolf Steiner, he was an Austrian philosopher and mystic who developed Anthroposophy, a spiritual movement that sought to integrate science, mysticism, and the occult. He was a prolific writer and lecturer, covering topics such as education, agriculture, medicine, and spirituality. Steiner's work led to the creation of Waldorf education, biodynamic farming, and anthroposophical medicine, all of which remain influential today. While his supporters view him as a visionary, his critics argue that many of his teachings are pseudoscientific and esoteric rather than grounded in evidence. Steiner's spiritual journey began with Theosophy, the occult movement founded by Helena Blavatsky, which emphasized Eastern mysticism, reincarnation, and esoteric wisdom. However, he later broke away from the Theosophical Society, believing that it focused too much on Hindu and Buddhist spirituality while neglecting the Christian esoteric tradition. In 1913, he founded Anthroposophy, a movement that blended Western esotericism, Christian mysticism, reincarnation, and a belief in the spiritual science of human evolution. He claimed to have clairvoyant abilities and said he could access the Akashic Records, a mystical cosmic archive containing all of humanity's past, present, and future knowledge. At the core of Anthroposophy was the idea that the material world is only a fraction of reality, and that humans could develop higher consciousness to access the spiritual realm. Steiner taught that reincarnation and karma were fundamental laws of existence, with souls evolving over multiple lifetimes towards spiritual enlightenment. He also had an unconventional view of Christ, seeing him as a cosmic force rather than a historical figure, whose role was to bring balance between the material and spiritual worlds. Beyond his spiritual teachings, Steiner had a lasting impact on education, agriculture, and medicine. His Waldorf education system, which emphasized holistic learning, creativity, and individual spiritual development, is still practiced in thousands of schools worldwide. In farming, he pioneered biodynamic agriculture, a type of organic farming that follows cosmic rhythms and astrological influences. Despite his influence, Steiner's work has been met with significant criticism. Many of his ideas, such as spiritual science and biodynamic farming, are dismissed as pseudoscience due to their lack of empirical evidence. Some of his writings on race and evolution have also been debated, with critics arguing that he proposed a hierarchical view of races in terms of spiritual progress. Additionally, his rejection of materialism in modern medicine has made him a controversial figure in scientific and religious circles. Regardless of these criticisms, Steiner's legacy continues to shape alternative education, organic farming, and holistic spirituality. Whether seen as a mystical philosopher or an eccentric visionary, his impact on esoteric thought and practical applications in daily life remains undeniable. Shabbatai Zevi. Shabbatai Zevi was a Jewish mystic and self-proclaimed messiah who led one of the most dramatic and controversial movements in Jewish history. Born in the Ottoman Empire, he gained a following by claiming to be the long-awaited Jewish messiah, prophesied to restore Israel and bring redemption. However, his story took an unexpected and shocking turn when he later converted to Islam, creating one of the greatest scandals in Jewish history. From an early age, Shabbatai Zevi was drawn to Kabbalah and began practicing esoteric rituals and extreme asceticism. By his 20s, he declared himself the Messiah, citing mystical experiences as proof. His charismatic presence and radical interpretations of Jewish law, including publicly pronouncing the forbidden name of God, gained him both followers and enemies. Eventually, he was banished from his hometown of Smyrna, modern-day Turkey, due to his controversial claims. His movement gained immense momentum when Mathan of Gaza, a well-known Kabbalist and visionary, claimed that Zevi was indeed the Messiah and that the world would soon be redeemed. Thousands of Jews across Europe and the Middle East became convinced that the Messianic age had arrived, selling their possessions in preparation for their return to Israel. However, when Zevi traveled to the Ottoman Sultan in 1666, expecting to take his place as ruler, he was instead arrested and given a choice: death or conversion to Islam. To the shock of his followers, he converted, abandoning Judaism and becoming a Muslim court official. This event caused an existential crisis within the Jewish world. Some rejected him as a fraud, while others believed his conversion was a hidden divine plan. A secret sect, later known as the Donme, continued to follow his teachings, believing that he had spiritually redeemed the world by descending into impurity. His story inspired later heretical movements, including Jacob Frank's Frankism, which took the idea of redemption through sin even further. Despite his fall from grace, his movement was one of the largest messianic waves in Jewish history, influencing Kabbalistic thought and creating divisions that lasted for centuries. Jacob Frank. Jacob Frank was a Jewish mystic, cult leader, and self-proclaimed messiah who founded Frankism, one of the most radical and controversial religious movements in Jewish history. Building on the teachings of Shabbatai Zvi, Frank preached a reversal of traditional Jewish law, promoting ideas that challenged moral and religious norms. His movement was seen as heretical and dangerous, yet it attracted thousands of followers and even influenced European religious and political history. Frank was born in what is now Ukraine and was deeply influenced by the mystical teachings of the Kabbalah. However, he took Zvi's ideas even further, declaring that true spiritual enlightenment came through sin, transgression, and breaking religious laws. This belief in redemption through sin became the core of Frankism. He and his followers openly rejected the Talmud, embraced sexual and social anarchy, and engaged in bizarre rituals that shocked both Jewish and Christian authorities. One of Frank's most radical moves was converting to Catholicism in 1759, along with thousands of his followers. Unlike Shabbatai Zvi, who was forced to convert to Islam, Frank actively encouraged conversion as a way to undermine both Judaism and Christianity from within. His followers, known as Frankists, saw Catholicism as a stepping stone to a new divine truth that transcended all religions. He declared himself the reincarnation of both Shabbatai Zvi and the biblical patriarch Jacob, claiming that his mission was to bring a new revelation. His teachings mixed Kabbalah, Gnosticism, Christianity, and outright rebellion against religious norms. His followers practiced secret rituals, including sexual rites, role reversals, and communal mysticism, which led to accusations of immorality and corruption. In 1760, Frank was arrested by Catholic authorities and spent 13 years in prison, but this only made him more powerful in the eyes of his followers, who saw his suffering as part of a divine mission. After his release, he moved to Germany and later to Austria, where he continued his radical teachings, claiming he was preparing the world for a final messianic revelation. However, by the time of his death in 1791, his movement had faded into obscurity, though some secret Frankist sects survived for generations. Emanuel Swedenborg. Emanuel Swedenborg was a Swedish scientist, philosopher, and Christian mystic who claimed to have visions of the spiritual world and direct communication with angels. Originally a respected scientist and engineer, he had a profound spiritual awakening, which led him to abandon his scientific career and dedicate himself to exploring the nature of heaven, hell, and the afterlife. Swedenborg's teachings emphasize that the physical and spiritual worlds are interconnected, and that true enlightenment comes from inner transformation and divine wisdom. He described heaven and hell in great detail, claiming that people's souls naturally gravitate toward one or the other based on their inner nature, rather than divine judgment. He also believed in correspondences, meaning that everything in the material world has a deeper spiritual meaning. His works, including Heaven and Hell and Divine Love and Wisdom, gained followers who later formed the Swedenborgian Church, a Christian movement based on his revelations. While some saw him as a visionary, others viewed him as delusional. However, his ideas influenced mysticism, psychology, and even famous thinkers like William Blake and Carl Jung. Nostradamus. Nostradamus was a French astrologer, physician, and reputed seer whose cryptic predictions have fascinated people for centuries. Born in Saint-Rémy de Provence, France, Nostradamus came from a family of Jewish converts to Christianity. He initially studied medicine at the University of Montpellier, where he gained a reputation for his progressive medical practices, particularly during the bubonic plague outbreaks. Unlike most doctors of his time, he emphasized hygiene, clean water, and herbal remedies, which were considered unorthodox yet effective. However, his career as a physician was eventually overshadowed by his growing interest in astrology, mysticism, and prophecy. Nostradamus's predictions were based on a combination of astrological calculations, historical patterns, and symbolic imagery. He reportedly used scrying, a form of divination where he gazed into a reflective surface, such as a bowl of water or a mirror, to receive visions. Many of his quatrains contained anagrams, archaic languages, and cryptic symbolism, making them difficult to interpret. Some believe he did this to avoid persecution by the Catholic Church, which was highly suspicious of fortune tellers and mystical practices. One of the reasons Nostradamus remains so famous is that many believe he successfully predicted key historical events. Some of his most famous alleged prophecies include the rise of Napoleon. Nostradamus described a leader born near Italy who would cost the empire a high price. Napoleon Bonaparte, born in Corsica, rose to power and led Europe into war. He also predicted the Great Fire of London in 1666. A quatrain mentions London burned by fire in the year 66, which many linked to the devastating fire that swept through the city. He predicted the rise of Adolf Hitler with a verse that describes a powerful leader rising from Western Europe, using his speeches to seduce the great troop. Many believe this refers to Hitler's charismatic rise to power, and many other predictions. Despite these seemingly accurate predictions, many scholars and skeptics argue that his quatrains are too vague to be considered real prophecies. Most interpretations come after an event has already occurred, and many translations have altered the original meanings of his verses to fit modern events. His defenders, however, claim that his use of metaphor and symbolism was intentional, allowing his predictions to transcend specific time periods. Whether Nostradamus was a genuine prophet, a skilled astrologer, or simply a master of cryptic poetry, his work has stood the test of time. His name remains synonymous with predicting the future, proving that his mysterious and controversial legacy will endure for centuries to come. Giordano Bruno. Giordano Bruno was an Italian philosopher, mystic, and former Dominican friar whose radical ideas about the universe, religion, and free thought led to his execution by the Catholic Inquisition. A visionary thinker, he was one of the first to propose that the universe is infinite, with countless other worlds beyond our own, possibly inhabited by intelligent beings. His ideas, which combined Neoplatonism, Hermeticism, and esoteric mysticism, challenged the rigid doctrines of the Church, making him one of history's most famous martyrs for free thought and scientific progress. Born in Nola, Italy, Bruno entered a Dominican monastery at a young age where he studied theology, philosophy, and cult traditions. However, his unorthodox views soon led him into conflict with church authorities. He rejected the geocentric model of the universe, which held that the Earth was the center of creation, embracing the heliocentric model of Copernicus, and expanding upon it with the idea of an infinite cosmos with no fixed center. This concept was centuries ahead of its time and laid the groundwork for modern astrophysics. Bruno's philosophy blended science, mysticism, and magic. He was heavily influenced by Neoplatonism, Kabbalah, and Hermetic teachings, believing that the divine was present throughout the cosmos and that humans could achieve enlightenment through knowledge and spiritual transformation. He also argued that all religions contained hidden esoteric truths, but that the Church had corrupted these original teachings. These ideas, along with his outright rejection of Catholic doctrine, made him a dangerous figure in the eyes of the Inquisition. After years of wandering through France, England, and Germany, where he engaged in debates and wrote extensively, Bruno was eventually arrested in Venice in 1592 and handed over to the Roman Inquisition. He was charged with heresy, blasphemy, belief in multiple worlds, and practicing magic. After 8 years of imprisonment and interrogation, he was condemned to death. On February 17, 1600, he was burned at the stake in Rome's Campo dei Fiori, reportedly refusing to renounce his beliefs. His last words were said to be, "Perhaps you pronounce this sentence against me with greater fear than I receive it." Bruno's legacy is profound. He is now seen as a martyr for science, philosophy, and freedom of thought. While his cosmological ideas were not based on empirical science, they anticipated later discoveries about the vastness of the universe. He also influenced later esoteric traditions, including Rosicrucianism and the Enlightenment thinkers. Today, he is celebrated as a symbol of intellectual courage, standing against dogma in pursuit of truth and knowledge. George Gurdjieff. George Ivanovich Gurdjieff was a mystic, philosopher, and spiritual teacher who developed a unique esoteric system known as the Fourth Way. He believed that most people live in a state of waking sleep, unaware of their full potential, and that true enlightenment could only be achieved through self-awareness, disciplined work, and breaking free from automatic habits. Born in Alexandropol, modern-day Armenia, part of the Russian Empire, Gurdjieff was fascinated by spirituality and ancient wisdom from an early age. He claimed to have traveled extensively across Central Asia, the Middle East, and North Africa, studying in hidden esoteric schools and gathering secret knowledge from Sufi mystics, Buddhist monks, and other spiritual traditions. He later synthesized these teachings into a practical system for self-development, which he called the Fourth Way. Unlike traditional spiritual paths such as the way of the monk, faith, the way of the fakir, austerity, and the way of the yogi, knowledge, Gurdjieff's Fourth Way combined elements of all three, but allowed individuals to remain engaged in daily life rather than withdrawing into monastic isolation. His teachings focused on self-observation, conscious movement, music, and psychological exercises, helping individuals awaken from their mechanical existence. A key aspect of his work was the Enneagram, a 9-pointed symbol that he used to explain human personality, energy cycles, and the dynamics of personal transformation. He also taught sacred dances, complex musical compositions, and psychological exercises to challenge students' habitual thinking and break their automatic behaviors. Gurdjieff established the Institute for the Harmonious Development of Man in France, where he trained students in his intense and often unconventional methods. His teaching style was provocative and challenging, designed to push students out of their comfort zones. Simon Magus. He is one of the most mysterious and controversial figures in early Christianity. He appears in the Book of Acts as a powerful sorcerer who amazed the people of Samaria with his miraculous abilities. Many even called him the great power of God because of the wonders he performed. But when the Apostle Philip arrived, preaching about Jesus, Simon seemed to have a change of heart. He was baptized and followed the apostles, appearing to accept the Christian faith. But things took a dark turn when Peter and John arrived. They laid hands on believers, granting them the Holy Spirit, and Simon was fascinated by their power. Instead of seeking spiritual enlightenment, he offered them money, hoping to buy the ability to give others the Holy Spirit. Peter rebuked him immediately, saying, "May your money perish with you because you thought you could buy the gift of God with money." Fearful of punishment, Simon begged them to pray for him. But this moment cemented his reputation as someone who sought divine power for selfish reasons, giving rise to the term simony, the sin of trying to buy or sell spiritual authority. While the biblical account ends there, Christian tradition tells an even darker story. Early church fathers like Justin Martyr, Irenaeus, and Hippolytus accused Simon Magus of being the founder of Gnosticism, a movement that preached secret knowledge and saw the material world as corrupt and fallen. According to these accounts, Simon declared himself divine, claiming to be the incarnation of God in human form. But perhaps the most dramatic tale about Simon Magus takes place in Rome, where he allegedly gained the favor of Emperor Nero. According to the apocryphal Acts of Peter, Simon challenged the apostle Peter to a battle of miracles, claiming he could prove his divine power. In a spectacular display, Simon levitated high into the air, astonishing the crowd. But Peter, through the power of prayer, caused Simon to fall from the sky, crashing to the ground and ultimately dying from his injuries. This legendary battle became a symbol of the struggle between Christianity and pagan magic in the ancient world. Over time, Simon Magus became a symbol of heresy, deception, and the misuse of spiritual power. The Christian tradition remembers him as the first false prophet, the man who tried to buy the gifts of God. But in some esoteric and occult traditions, Simon is seen in a different light, not as a villain, but as a misunderstood mystic, an early teacher of hidden wisdom that was later suppressed by the church. Apollonius of Tyana. He was a first-century philosopher, mystic, and miracle worker whose life has been shrouded in legend and controversy. He was a contemporary of Jesus, and many of his followers believed he possessed divine powers, performing miracles that rivaled those of Christ. Some even claimed he was the true Son of God, while others saw him as a charlatan, a magician, or a sage deeply connected to the mystical traditions of the East. His story, largely told by the 3rd century writer Philostratus, is filled with mysticism, esoteric wisdom, and supernatural feats. Born in Tyana, in modern-day Turkey, Apollonius was said to be a child prodigy who displayed extraordinary intelligence from a young age. He became a devoted follower of Pythagorean philosophy, adopting its strict rules, a vegetarian diet, celibacy, and a commitment to nonviolence. But unlike most philosophers of his time, Apollonius didn't just teach, he traveled the world in search of divine knowledge. He is said to have journeyed through Greece, Egypt, Mesopotamia, and even India, where he studied under Brahmins and ascetics. What made Apollonius truly famous were the miracles attributed to him. According to legend, he could heal the sick, cast out demons, predict the future, and even raise the dead. In one of his most famous miracles, he supposedly entered the city of Ephesus during a plague and commanded a demon-possessed beggar to die. Upon his death, the plague immediately disappeared. Another story claims that he brought a young girl back to life simply by whispering something in her ear. These acts led many to see him as a holy man, while others accused him of practicing forbidden magic. But Apollonius wasn't just a mystic, he was also a controversial political figure. He openly criticized Roman emperors, including Nero and Domitian, for their tyranny and corruption. This defiance almost cost him his life. The emperor Domitian arrested him on charges of sorcery and conspiracy, but legend says that during his trial, Apollonius vanished into thin air, escaping the court without a trace. His followers treated him like a divine being, claiming that he ascended to heaven after death and continued to appear in visions to his disciples. But early Christians viewed him with suspicion, as his miracles, teachings, and divine claims seemed eerily similar to those of Jesus Christ. Some Christian writers accused him of being a deceiver and a sorcerer who tried to rival Jesus. Eliphas Levi, born Alphonse Louis Constant in 1810 in France, he was one of the most influential figures in Western occultism. His writings and teachings laid the foundation for modern esoteric traditions, including Thelema, Hermeticism, and ceremonial magic. Levi was not just a writer but also a magician, philosopher, and mystic, blending Christian mysticism with Kabbalah, alchemy, and ancient magical traditions. His most famous book, Dogma and Ritual of High Magic, introduced key esoteric ideas that would later inspire Aleister Crowley, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and various occult movements. Levi was originally trained for the Catholic priesthood, studying theology and philosophy in his youth. However, he never took his final vows, as he became increasingly drawn to mysticism, radical politics, and esoteric knowledge. In his early years, he was influenced by socialist and utopian ideas, even writing political and religious critiques. However, as he matured, he abandoned political activism and turned his focus entirely to spiritual and magical studies, seeking to uncover the hidden forces that govern the universe. Throughout his writings, Levi attempted to synthesize various mystical traditions, including Jewish Kabbalah, alchemy, ceremonial magic, and tarot symbolism. He saw magic as a spiritual science, rooted in divine principles rather than superstition or dark forces. One of his most famous concepts was the astral light, a universal energy field that connects all things and can be manipulated through the will and ritual magic. This idea later influenced esoteric theories about Akashic records, spiritual energy, and higher consciousness in Theosophy and other mystical schools of thought. Perhaps Levi's most controversial contribution was his drawing of Baphomet, a goat-headed figure with male and female characteristics, pointing both to the heavens and the earth. He described it as a symbol of balance, wisdom, and divine mysteries, embodying the duality of existence, light and dark, male and female, spirit and matter. However, later misinterpretations of this image associated it with satanic worship, even though Levi himself never intended it as an evil figure. His Baphomet would go on to influence modern occultism, Satanism, conspiracy theories, and pop culture depictions of the occult. John Dee, he was a mathematician, astronomer, astrologer, alchemist, and magician, seamlessly blending science and mysticism in ways that shaped both the Renaissance worldview and the development of Western occultism. Best known as an advisor to Queen Elizabeth I, Dee played a key role in early navigation, cryptography, and Hermetic philosophy. However, his deep involvement in angelic magic and communication with spirits made him a controversial figure, leaving behind a legacy of both brilliance and mystery. John Dee was born in London in 1527, showing exceptional intelligence from a young age. He studied at Cambridge University, where he excelled in mathematics, astronomy, and navigation. Seeking knowledge beyond England, he traveled across Europe, studying under some of the greatest minds of his time, including Gerardus Mercator, the famed cartographer. Dee's expertise in cartography and navigation played a crucial role in England's maritime expansion, and some historians believe he may have coined the term British Empire. Dee became a trusted advisor to Queen Elizabeth, serving as her astrologer, mathematician, and scientific consultant. In 1558, he selected the most auspicious date for her coronation using astrology, strengthening his position at court. His knowledge of optics, cryptography, and mathematics made him an invaluable resource for Elizabeth's government, particularly in matters of navigation, national security, and intelligence. Despite his scientific achievements, Dee became increasingly drawn to mysticism and the occult. He believed that mathematics was a divine language and that humans could use it to communicate with higher beings. Around 1581, Dee met Edward Kelly, a self-proclaimed medium who claimed to receive messages from angels through a crystal ball. Fascinated by this, Dee and Kelly began a series of intense spirit communication sessions during which they recorded messages from celestial beings. This work led to the creation of Enochian magic, a system of angelic communication said to be the language of the angels. Dee meticulously documented these visions, believing they contained divine knowledge that could reshape the world. His work on the Enochian alphabet and mystical symbols later became foundational texts for Western occult traditions, influencing groups like the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, Theosophy, and Aleister Crowley's Thelema. In the 1580s, Dee and Kelly embarked on an extraordinary journey across Europe, presenting themselves as messengers of divine knowledge. They visited the courts of nobles, emperors, and alchemists, hoping to gain support for their mystical discoveries. However, their credibility was questioned when Kelly claimed that the angels commanded them to share their wives, leading to tension and the eventual collapse of their partnership. After years of traveling, Dee returned to England in 1589, only to find that his influence at court had diminished. Queen Elizabeth no longer relied on him as she once had, and under King James, magic and the occult were increasingly seen as dangerous and heretical. Dee spent his final years in poverty and isolation, regarded by many as a failed magician rather than a brilliant scholar. He died in 1609, largely forgotten by the same world he once sought to enlighten. Meister Eckhart. He was a German Dominican theologian, philosopher, and mystic known for his deep exploration of the soul's relationship with God. His teachings emphasized divine unity, inner contemplation, and the idea that God is present within every human being. He believed that through detachment, Gelassenheit, and deep meditation, one could achieve a direct experience of God beyond religious rituals. Eckhart's sermons and writings, often poetic and philosophical, were controversial in his time. His ideas challenged traditional church doctrine, leading to accusations of heresy by Pope John XXII. Though he denied any wrongdoing, he died before his trial could conclude. Despite this, his teachings greatly influenced later Christian mysticism, Sufism, and modern spiritual thought. Today, Meister Eckhart is celebrated as one of the greatest Christian mystics, inspiring seekers across religious traditions with his vision of a deep, personal connection with the divine. Aleister Crowley. He was a British occultist, writer, and ceremonial magician, best known for founding Thelema, a spiritual philosophy based on the phrase, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." His work in esotericism, ritual magic, and mysticism made him one of the most controversial and influential occult figures of the 20th century. Born into a strict Christian fundamentalist family, Crowley rejected religion early in life and immersed himself in the study of Western esotericism, alchemy, and Kabbalah. He became a member of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, where he trained in ceremonial magic but soon clashed with its leadership. In 1904, he claimed to have received the Book of the Law, a channeled text from a supernatural entity named Aiwass, which laid the foundation for Thelema. Crowley's life was filled with occult experiments, drug use, and sexual rituals, earning him the title of the wickedest man in the world by the British press. He traveled widely, experimenting with Eastern mysticism, yoga, and astral projection, and established the Abbey of Thelema in Sicily, which became infamous for its unorthodox practices. Despite his notoriety, Crowley's influence on modern occultism, Wicca, Satanism, and pop culture is undeniable. Whether viewed as a prophet, madman, or charlatan, Crowley's impact on the world of ritual magic and spiritual rebellion continues to endure. Madame Helena Blavatsky, she was a Russian occultist, mystic, and writer, best known as the founder of the Theosophical Society. She was one of the most influential figures in modern esotericism, blending Eastern and Western mystical traditions into a new spiritual philosophy. Her teachings laid the foundation for Theosophy, a movement that profoundly influenced Western occultism, New Age spirituality, and the popularization of Eastern mysticism in the West. Born into a noble Russian family, Blavatsky showed an early fascination with the mystical and supernatural. According to her accounts, she traveled extensively across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, where she claimed to have studied with secret spiritual masters, whom she referred to as the Mahatmas or hidden masters. These teachers, she said, were the custodians of ancient wisdom and guided her in understanding higher spiritual truths, karma, and the evolution of the soul. Her most famous travels allegedly led her to India and Tibet, where she immersed herself in Hindu and Buddhist teachings. In 1875, Blavatsky co-founded the Theosophical Society in New York alongside Henry Steele Olcott and William Quan Judge. The organization aimed to bridge Eastern and Western philosophies and had three main objectives: to promote universal brotherhood, to study comparative religion, science, philosophy, and to investigate hidden spiritual forces within nature and humanity. She believed that all religions shared a common source, a primordial, ancient wisdom that had been lost over time. Her movement sought to revive this knowledge and awaken spiritual consciousness. Blavatsky's literary works became the foundation of Theosophy. Her first major book, Isis Unveiled, criticized organized religion and materialist science, arguing that both had deviated from ancient superior wisdom. Later, The Secret Doctrine introduced the controversial idea of root races, proposing that human civilization evolved through spiritual cycles. Though influential, these ideas also drew criticism for their mystical complexity and racial undertones. Throughout her life, Blavatsky remained a polarizing figure. Supporters saw her as a genuine mystic and visionary, while critics accused her of fraud, plagiarism, and fabricating her spiritual experiences. Investigations, including one by the Society for Psychical Research in 1885, claimed to have exposed her as a hoaxer. Despite this, her charisma and compelling teachings ensured that Theosophy continued to grow, gaining followers in India, Europe, and the United States. Blavatsky's influence on modern spirituality, occultism, and esoteric thought is undeniable. Her teachings also left a lasting impact on esoteric Freemasonry, Western magic, and modern paganism. Despite the controversies surrounding her life, Madame Blavatsky remains one of the most fascinating and debated figures in esoteric history. Her work laid the groundwork for spiritual seekers to explore beyond dogmatic religion, merging science, philosophy, and mysticism in a way that continues to inspire generations. Anton LaVey. He was one of the most dangerous figures in modern occultism. Born Howard Stanton LaVey in Chicago in 1930, he later changed his name to Anton Szandor LaVey and emerged in the 1960s as the founder of what he called the first organized religion dedicated to Satan. But contrary to popular belief, LaVey's Satanism wasn't about devil worship. It was about challenging religious hypocrisy, embracing carnal desires, and worshiping the self as the highest authority. In 1966, LaVey declared the founding of the Church of Satan on April 30th, a night historically associated with witches and dark magic. He shaved his head, dressed in theatrical black robes, and proclaimed himself the high priest of Satan. To the media and the religious world, he was a walking provocation. But to his followers, he was a revolutionary thinker who gave them permission to reject guilt, shame, and blind faith. LaVey's most influential work, The Satanic Bible, was published in 1969. It blended philosophy, psychology, and performance ritual into a manifesto for the modern Satanist. The book rejects the spiritual doctrines of Christianity and instead promotes indulgence, vengeance, self-preservation, and personal empowerment. It presents a harsh but unapologetic worldview. Turn the other cheek? Hell no, if someone slaps you, strike back. Love your neighbor only if they deserve it. In LaVey's world, compassion was earned, not assumed. Despite the outrage he stirred, LaVey's version of Satanism was fundamentally atheistic. He didn't believe in God or the devil. In fact, he saw most religion as a tool for control, designed to keep people ashamed of their natural instincts. Satan, to LaVey, represented everything that mainstream religion condemned: lust, pride, defiance, and individualism, and instead of suppressing those traits, he celebrated them. Anton LaVey died in 1997, but his legacy lives on through the Church of Satan and the countless subcultures influenced by his philosophy. Jack Parsons, he was a man torn between science and sorcery, a rocket scientist by day and an occultist by night. Born in 1914 in Pasadena, California, his full name was Marvel Whiteside Parsons, but he would later be known as Jack, one of the most brilliant and bizarre minds of the 20th century. He helped pioneer American rocketry and co-founded the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which would eventually become part of NASA. But while he launched humanity toward the stars with scientific innovation, he also delved into the dark depths of the occult, seeking spiritual power through rituals, sex magic, and forbidden knowledge. Parsons was fascinated with the works of Aleister Crowley, the infamous British occultist. In the 1940s, Jack joined the Ordo Templi Orientis, Crowley's magical order, and quickly rose through its ranks. He led the Agape Lodge in Pasadena, where rituals were performed regularly, some involving robes, incense, and chants, others involving sex magic. Parsons believed that magic and science weren't opposites, they were both tools for unlocking hidden truths of the universe. In 1946, Parsons undertook his most ambitious and controversial ritual, known as the Babylon Working. Alongside science fiction writer L. Ron Hubbard, the same man who would later found Scientology, Parsons performed a series of occult rituals designed to summon the divine feminine force known as Babylon. He believed that by channeling this energy, he could help bring about a new age of spiritual and sexual liberation. The ceremonies involved chanting, invocations, and intense sexual acts intended to create a magical child, an incarnation of divine energy that could change the world. But things began to spiral out of control. Hubbard eventually betrayed Parsons, running off with his money and his lover. The scientific community distanced itself from Parsons due to his wild reputation, and the US government began investigating him for his occult connections, fearing he might be a security risk during the Cold War. His once promising career in aerospace was effectively destroyed, and he became a recluse, dabbling in homemade explosives, alchemy, and occult texts. On June 17, 1952, Jack Parsons died in a mysterious explosion in his home laboratory. Officially, it was ruled an accident caused by mishandling volatile chemicals. But conspiracy theories abound. Some believe he was assassinated. Others say it was a magical misfire or even a ritual sacrifice gone wrong. Today, Jack Parsons is remembered as both a scientific genius and a spiritual rebel. Michael Aquino. A U.S. Army officer by profession and a high-ranking occultist by passion, he lived at the intersection of military intelligence and ceremonial magic. Born in 1946, Aquino was a highly educated man, sharp, articulate, and well-versed in psychological warfare. But beneath his academic and military background lay a deep devotion to the dark arts, particularly the left-hand path. Aquino first rose to prominence within Anton LaVey's Church of Satan, where he quickly became a key figure due to his intellect and disciplined approach to magic. However, Aquino grew disillusioned with what he saw as LaVey's commercialization of Satanism. In 1975, after a philosophical split, he broke away and founded the Temple of Set, a more esoteric and theistic order that viewed Set, not Satan, as a real metaphysical being. To Aquino, Set represented the primordial force of individual consciousness and self-deification. His new order emphasized personal evolution, spiritual elitism, and the pursuit of immortality through will and wisdom. Aquino claimed that the Temple of Set was created through direct communication with the god Set himself. He wrote extensively on what he called the Book of Coming Forth by Night, a channeled text that he believed was Set's message to humanity. In contrast to LaVey's atheistic and symbolic Satanism, Aquino's teachings were metaphysical, complex, and deeply mystical. He viewed magic as a science of the mind and the soul, and believed that through ritual and initiation, a practitioner could separate from the limitations of the material world and achieve divine selfhood. His dual identity as both a military officer and a cult leader made him a magnet for controversy. Aquino served as a psychological operations officer in the U.S. Army, holding the rank of lieutenant colonel. His involvement in psychological warfare led some to speculate that he blended occult principles with military strategies, a claim he never outright confirmed, but never seemed eager to deny either. His reputation took a darker turn in the 1980s, when he was falsely implicated in the infamous Presidio child abuse scandal, a case that sparked a wave of satanic panic across America. Despite extensive investigations, no charges were filed and Aquino was eventually cleared, but the damage to his public image lingered. Until his death in 2019, Michael Aquino remained a controversial yet influential figure in occult circles. He was seen by some as a brilliant philosopher of the left-hand path, and by others as a dangerous and manipulative man who blurred the lines between reality and ritual. He authored several works including The Temple of Set, Black Magic, and Mind War, the latter of which theorized how psychological operations could influence global outcomes. Edward Kelly, born in England in 1555, he was best known as the scryer or spirit medium for the famous mathematician and occultist, Dr. John Dee. Together, they claimed to communicate with angels using a crystal ball and a mystical language they called Enochian, said to be the original language of the angels. Kelly was known for his dramatic seances and bold personality, which contrasted with Dee's scholarly demeanor. Some believed Kelly was a fraud, using theatrical tricks to impress Dee and gain favor, yet despite the skepticism, Dee trusted him deeply, so much so that he allowed Kelly to lead many of their spiritual sessions, during which they recorded entire volumes of so-called angelic revelations. Later in life, Kelly claimed to have discovered the secret to alchemy, specifically the Philosopher's Stone, the mythical substance capable of turning base metals into gold. These claims attracted the attention of European nobility, but also led to his imprisonment when he couldn't deliver results. He died under mysterious circumstances in 1597, likely while trying to escape from captivity. Maria Orsic, often described as a psychic medium, mystic, and alleged member of a secret Nazi-era occult group known as the Vril Society. She is believed to have been born in Vienna in 1895 to a Croatian father and a German mother. According to various accounts, Maria Orsic was no ordinary medium. She was said to possess extraordinary telepathic and channeled communication abilities. In the early 20th century, she allegedly made contact with beings from Aldebaran, a star system in the Taurus constellation. These entities, said to be part of an ancient Aryan race, supposedly provided Maria with detailed blueprints for advanced technology, including anti-gravity engines and spacecraft. Alongside other female mystics, she reportedly led seances and psychic transmissions that resulted in strange diagrams and scripts in unknown languages, believed by her followers to be alien or Sumerian in origin. Maria became central to the mythology of the so-called Vril Society, a shadowy group that supposedly merged German nationalism with deep occult teachings. Inspired by the 1871 science fiction novel The Coming Race by Edward Bulwer Lytton, the Vril Society believed in a cosmic energy force called Vril, an all-powerful substance capable of fueling machines, empowering the human will, and connecting humanity to higher dimensional beings. Maria and her fellow Vrillians, many of whom were young women with long, flowing hair they believed acted as psychic antennae, were said to be in direct contact with these extraterrestrial intelligences. As World War II intensified, so did the rumors surrounding Maria Orsic and the Vril Society. Some believe they collaborated with the Nazi regime in secret, using the Vril communications to attempt to develop flying saucers, time portals, or other exotic technologies. While mainstream historians reject these claims as pseudoscience, conspiracy circles suggest that Maria's knowledge played a role in the infamous Nazi UFO programs. Then, in 1945, Maria Orsic vanished. As the Allies closed in on Berlin and Nazi Germany collapsed, she reportedly sent a final message to her followers: "No one is staying here." To this day, no verifiable record of her death has surfaced. Some claim she died anonymously, others insist she and the Vril women escaped. Perhaps to South America, perhaps to a secret Arctic base, or even beyond Earth entirely. Adam Weishaupt. He was the mastermind behind one of the most legendary secret societies in history, the Illuminati. Born in 1748 in Ingolstadt, Bavaria, was a brilliant scholar, a professor of canon law, and a radical thinker at a time when Europe was dominated by monarchy, church authority, and rigid social structures. What made Adam different was his deep belief in reason, liberty, and the power of human intellect to reshape the world. But rather than shouting his ideas in public, he chose to spread them in secret. In 1776, the same year as the American Declaration of Independence, Weishaupt founded the Order of the Illuminati. His goals were to challenge the oppressive power of the church and the monarchy, and to promote Enlightenment values like rationalism, equality, and freedom of thought. But he didn't trust the public to handle these ideas directly. Instead, he created a secret order that would infiltrate existing power structures, educational institutions, religious orders, political circles, with the aim of slowly transforming society from within. The Illuminati was structured like a mystery school, with multiple degrees, secret initiations, and hidden knowledge revealed only to those who advanced through the ranks. Members were taught to question authority, reject superstition, and work toward a more enlightened society. But they were also expected to obey the hierarchy of the order itself. At its peak, the Illuminati reportedly had hundreds of members, including poets, philosophers, nobles, and scientists. They spread across parts of Germany and Austria, blending in with Freemasonry and other esoteric groups. But their growing influence didn't go unnoticed. In 1784, the Bavarian government declared the Illuminati a threat to the state and outlawed the organization. Adam was forced into exile, fleeing to Gotha, where he continued to write and reflect on philosophy, but never returned to public power. Gerald Gardner. He was an English civil servant, folklorist, and occultist, best known as the founder of modern Wicca. Born in 1884, Gardner spent much of his early life traveling across Asia, where he became fascinated with tribal beliefs, magical practices, and ancient religions. This exposure would shape his lifelong interest in the mystical and the arcane. In the late 1930s and 1940s, Gardner claimed he was initiated into a surviving coven of witches in southern England, a group he referred to as the New Forest Coven. He believed this coven preserved elements of a pre-Christian pagan religion that had been passed down in secret for centuries. Gardner took what he learned and began to codify it into a system of practice. By the early 1950s, Gardner began publicly sharing these teachings, giving birth to what we now call Wicca. He combined elements of ceremonial magic, Freemasonry, Theosophy, and British folklore to create a modern pagan religion centered on the worship of a god and a goddess, the use of ritual magic, and a deep reverence for nature and the seasons. Gardner's books, including Witchcraft Today and The Meaning of Witchcraft, were pivotal in bringing Wicca into public awareness. His rituals often involved casting circles, invoking deities, celebrating sabbats and esbats, and using ceremonial tools like athames and pentacles. His approach was hands-on, deeply spiritual, but also theatrical. He saw ritual as both sacred and symbolic. Though his claims of ancient origins were often challenged, Gardner's influence was undeniable. He effectively rebranded witchcraft not as devil worship or superstition, but as an earth-centered spiritual path. Franz Bardon, born in 1909 in Opava, Czechoslovakia, was a quiet but profound figure in the world of Hermetic magic. Unlike many occultists of his time, Bardon didn't seek followers or fame. He focused on disciplined personal transformation over theory or ritual. His teachings laid the foundation for modern Western esoteric practice. Bardon is best known for his trilogy on Hermetic magic. His first and most famous book, Initiation into Hermetics, offers a step-by-step guide to mastering the mind, body, and spirit. Techniques like breath control, visualization, and mental focus were central, not for show, but for real inner power. His second book, The Practice of Magical Evocation, explores the summoning of spiritual beings, but with a strong emphasis on humility and self-mastery. The magician, Bardon believed, should work with divine order, not dominate it. In The Key to the True Kabbalah, his third book, Bardon taught how sound and vibration could be used to shape reality, a unique take that blended mystical language with cosmic resonance. Barden's life was not without hardship. He was reportedly imprisoned by the Nazis during World War II and later by the communist regime. He died in prison in 1958 under unclear circumstances, yet his legacy lives on. Barden's books continue to guide magicians, mystics, and seekers who value authentic inner transformation over superficial magic. Zoroaster, also known as Zarathustra, was an ancient Persian prophet and religious reformer who founded Zoroastrianism, one of the world's oldest monotheistic religions. He is believed to have lived sometime between 1500 BC and 600 BCE, though scholars debate the exact date. His teachings shaped not only Persian spirituality but also influenced Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The details of Zoroaster's life are shrouded in mystery, but according to tradition, he was born in eastern Persia, modern Iran, or Afghanistan, into a priestly family. At the age of 30, he experienced a divine vision in which the supreme god Ahura Mazda revealed the truth to him. This vision marked the beginning of his mission to reform the polytheistic Indo-Iranian religion and replace it with the worship of one supreme deity. However, his ideas faced strong resistance from the powerful religious elite. For many years, he struggled to gain followers until he found support from King Vishtaspa, who adopted his teachings and helped spread Zoroastrianism throughout Persia. Zoroaster introduced a dualist worldview centered around the cosmic struggle between Ahura Mazda, the god of light and truth, and Engram-Mainyu, spirit of darkness and deception. He emphasized the free will of humans to choose between good and evil and established three core ethical principles: good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. Zoroastrianism also introduced the idea of a final judgment, where souls would be judged based on their actions and sent to heaven or hell. However, this struggle was seen as temporary. Zoroastrianism teaches that good will ultimately triumph. Zoroaster was not only a religious figure but also a philosophical and cultural icon. Greek philosophers like Plato and Aristotle admired his teachings, and in modern times, Friedrich Nietzsche's book, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, reimagined his name in a philosophical context. His legacy endures as one of the most influential religious figures in history, with his teachings still influencing the beliefs of millions around the world.
Lao Tzu. He is a foundational figure in Chinese philosophy and mysticism, traditionally credited with writing the Tao Te Ching, one of the most influential texts in Eastern philosophy and Taoist thought. His teachings, centered on the Tao, the Way, and the principles of harmony, balance, and spontaneity, have shaped Chinese culture and spirituality for millennia. Lao Tzu is thought to have lived during the 6th century BCE, though historical records are scarce, and much about his life remains a mystery. According to legend, he was a contemporary of Confucius, who admired him as a wise elder. Some accounts say he served as a record keeper or librarian for the royal court of the Zhou dynasty, before withdrawing from society due to its moral decline. As the story goes, when he left the court to retreat to the mountains, a gatekeeper urged him to write down his teachings. This request resulted in the Tao Te Ching, a text containing the essence of his philosophy. The Tao Te Ching is a brief but profound work composed of 81 poetic verses. It explores the nature of the Tao, or the Way, and offers guidance on how to live in harmony with it. The Tao is an unnameable, eternal force that flows through and underpins all things. Lao Tzu describes it as both the source and the guiding principle of the universe, something beyond human understanding but accessible through intuition and surrender. Lao Tzu also emphasizes the principle of Wu Wei, or non-action, which doesn't imply inaction but rather aligning with the natural flow of things. It's about not forcing outcomes and allowing events to unfold naturally, in harmony with the Tao. He encourages simplicity, humility, and contentment, advocating for living without excessive desire or attachment. He sees virtue as flowing naturally from a simple, unpretentious life close to the Tao. He also speaks of opposites as interdependent, with harmony arising from their balance. He didn't explicitly use the term yin-yang, but his teachings reflect this concept of complementary dualities. Lao Tzu's ideas became the foundation of Taoism, an indigenous Chinese spiritual and philosophical tradition. While Taoism, as a formal religion, developed later, Lao Tzu's teachings form its core, with practitioners viewing him as an immortal sage or even a deity, inspiring practices like meditation, qigong, and tai chi. Buddha. Born Siddhartha Gautama around the 5th century BCE in what is now Nepal, was a spiritual leader and the founder of Buddhism. His teachings, rooted in understanding suffering and achieving enlightenment, have become one of the world's most influential spiritual paths. Siddhartha Gautama was born into a royal family and led a sheltered life of luxury, isolated from the realities of human suffering. However, as a young man, he ventured outside the palace and encountered the 4 sights: an old man, a sick man, a dead body, and a wandering ascetic. These experiences made him aware of life's suffering and inspired him to renounce his princely life in search of truth and freedom from suffering. Siddhartha spent years as a wandering ascetic, studying with various teachers and practicing severe self-denial. After realizing that extreme asceticism wasn't the path to enlightenment, he adopted a middle way, a balanced approach to spiritual practice. He meditated under the Bodhi tree at Bodhi Gaya, where he ultimately attained enlightenment and became the Buddha, which means the awakened one. He discovered the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, which serves as a framework for ethical and mental practices that lead to liberation. They include right understanding of reality, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Buddha taught his insights for nearly 45 years across northern India, establishing a community of followers who preserved and spread his teachings. Over centuries, Buddhism evolved into various schools, with two major branches emerging: Theravada Buddhism, which emphasizes the Pali Canon and individual enlightenment, and Mahayana Buddhism, which focuses on universal compassion and enlightenment for all beings. Jesus Christ. He is a central figure in Christianity, is considered by Christians to be the Son of God and the Messiah prophesied in the Old Testament. His teachings, life, death, and resurrection are foundational to the Christian faith, which regards him as both fully divine and fully human. Jesus' influence extends beyond Christianity, impacting Western philosophy, ethics, and religious thought. Jesus was born around 4 BCE in Bethlehem, in Roman-occupied Judea. His mother, Mary, was a young Jewish woman, and Christian tradition holds that she conceived Jesus miraculously. Jesus grew up in Nazareth, a modest town, with his family, and little is known about his life from infancy to adulthood. Around the age of 30, Jesus began his public ministry. He traveled through Galilee and Judea, teaching in synagogues, performing miracles, and gathering followers. His teachings focused on love, compassion, forgiveness, and the kingdom of God. Jesus emphasized love as the highest commandment, instructing his followers to love God, love their neighbors, and even love their enemies. Jesus also emphasized faith as essential for salvation, especially faith in God and his teachings. Christians believe that through Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, humanity can be reconciled with God. He performed numerous miracles, such as healing the sick, casting out demons, calming storms, and even raising the dead. These acts were seen as signs of his divine nature and his compassion for human suffering. Additionally, he taught using parables, simple stories with profound moral and spiritual lessons. Jesus' growing popularity and his challenge to the religious and political authorities led to his arrest. The Roman governor Pontius Pilate, at the urging of local religious leaders, sentenced him to crucifixion. Christians believe that Jesus' death was a sacrifice for humanity's sins, fulfilling prophecies about a suffering Messiah. According to the New Testament, Jesus rose from the dead 3 days after his crucifixion. His resurrection is seen as proof of his divinity and the promise of eternal life for his followers. Today, Jesus is revered not only by Christians but also acknowledged in Islam as a prophet. His teachings on compassion, forgiveness, and the pursuit of spiritual truth continue to resonate, encouraging people across faiths and cultures to live with love and integrity. Muhammad. He was born in Mecca, a bustling trade center in the Arabian Peninsula, into the influential Quraysh tribe. Orphaned as a child, he was raised by his grandfather and later his uncle. Known for his integrity, he earned the nickname Al-Amin, or the Trustworthy. At age 25, he married Khadija, a wealthy widow and respected merchant, and lived a stable, respected life. Around the age of 40, during a period of spiritual reflection in the cave of Hira, Muhammad received his first revelation from the angel Gabriel. This marked the beginning of a series of divine messages. His message centered on monotheism, urging people to worship Allah alone and abandon idolatry. He also promoted social justice, charity, and compassion, challenging many existing norms that favored the wealthy and marginalized the poor. Initially, Muhammad's teachings faced hostility in Mecca, especially from leaders who saw his message as a threat to the traditional tribal structure. Persecution increased, leading Muhammad and his followers to migrate to the city of Yathrib in 622 CE. In Medina, Muhammad became not only a religious leader but also a statesman, uniting the local tribes under the new Islamic faith. By his death in 632 CE, Muhammad had united much of the Arabian Peninsula under Islam. Muslims regard him as the final prophet in a line that includes figures like Abraham, Moses, and Jesus, believing that he brought the ultimate and complete message of God.